The story of Samson is a brutal, spectacular paradox. He was a champion chosen by divine decree, a physical marvel gifted with impossible strength, a man who tore a lion apart with his bare hands and struck down 1,000 men with the jawbone of a donkey. Yet this great force of nature, this living weapon of God, was ultimately destroyed not by an army but by a weakness he carried within his own heart. He was stronger than his enemies, but tragically weaker than his own desire. His life began with a divine promise. A Nazirite vow set him apart. No razor was to touch his hair. No wine was to touch his lips. His strength was a sacred trust, a symbol of his singular devotion. But the story quickly becomes a study in self-sabotage. Samson treated his divine gift like a personal commodity, trading the sacred for the sensual, constantly seeking pleasure outside the boundaries of his calling. He would confront a Philistine army, but he couldn't confront his own lust for immediate gratification. The secret of his strength was not in his muscles, it was in his commitment to the vow. The secret of his weakness was his belief that he could violate that vow and still retain the power. Enter Delilah. She was not a warrior, she was a persistent temptation, hired to do what no army could, discover the source of his secret. And Samson began to play a dangerous game. He entertained her questions, offering false answers, playing with fire near the sanctuary of his soul. He lied 3 times, but each lie brought him closer to the edge, revealing the terrifying truth. He valued her presence and his comfort more than the covenant of his power. This is the definition of spiritual compromise, knowing the cost, yet choosing the temporary pleasure anyway. The 4th time, the pressure became too great. Worn down by her incessant emotional warfare, how can you say, "I love you," when your heart is not with me? Samson finally surrendered the truth. He confessed the sacred source of his power, the 7 locks of his hair. In that moment of exhausted compromise, the secret was out, the vow was broken, and the power was already leaving. He awoke, expecting the same supernatural force to surge through his veins. He thought, "I will go out as before and shake myself free." But the text delivers the shattering truth, but he did not know that the Lord had left him. The Philistines seized him immediately. They gouged out the eyes that had led him astray, the eyes that had constantly chased fleeting pleasure, making him a blind slave in the service of their god, Dagon. He was the defeated hero, mocked and paraded as a warning to all of Israel. He was forced to grind corn in the prison house, the mighty champion reduced to the lowest form of labor. It was here, in the cold darkness of his humiliation, that Samson finally began to walk in true faith, not just in physical strength. His final prayer was not for escape, but for one last moment of redemptive power. The Philistines brought him to their temple, and Samson asked to be placed between the 2 main pillars. He cried out to the Lord, seeking not his own freedom, but a final act of vengeance for his blinded eyes, an act to honor the God he had so recklessly betrayed. With a final, desperate surge of divine strength, he bowed with all his might. The temple collapsed, killing the Philistines and, tragically, Samson himself. He killed more people in his death than he had in his life. The story of Samson is a mirror held up to every person of faith. You may be gifted, chosen, and powerful, but your greatest threat is never outside your walls. It is the compromise you allow within your heart. The greatest strength is not in the physical act, it is in the faithfulness to the sacred vow. The consequences of compromise are always greater than the pleasure of the moment. We must never forget the price of weakness, or the horrifying moment when a gifted man woke up to discover the Lord had left him. If this narrative anchors your resolve to stand strong against compromise, please subscribe to the Anchor Scroll. We are dedicated to delivering cinematic biblical truths 4 times every single week. To understand the deep spiritual lesson here, make sure you also watch our deep dive, The Quiet Destroyer. Hit the subscribe button now and never compromise your calling.